I'm so scared. Yes, it's true. I'm so freaking scared. But for the right reasons, though. I'm scared for the right reasons. I don't know why I'm filming this video. Hopefully, this will mean something beautiful by the end of this, but may this serve as a diary entry for what I'm about to embark on. Oh my God. I think I've mentioned it in a few places, but I'm in the process of filming my very first narrative short film, which is equal parts scary, but mostly exciting. Let's just say it's really exciting. And it's scary for the right reasons. Like, just to give you a little bit of a background, I'm someone that loves movies so much. And I think the reason why I started gravitating towards movies, it's because I wanted to feel something. I wanted to feel seen. I wanted to feel represented. I wanted to watch something that made me feel like anything is possible. Impossible is nothing type thing. I kind of became obsessed with that feeling and the idea of chasing that feeling, not only by creating it, which could be making a short or writing a short, or a full feature film, but watching it, consuming it, and trying to find it. That's kind of the reasoning of why I started watching movies in the first place. At least actively watching movies as an aficionado. But it's kind of funny because when I moved to LA, whether it was people from Miami or from Venezuela, from back home, like a lot of people will always be like, oh, so what's the dream? You want to become a big time Hollywood director? And my answer would always be the same. I was like, you know what? Not really. Like, it's not even in my plans. Like, I'd never seen myself as a big time Hollywood director. Not because I didn't think it was good enough, it just kind of wasn't part of the dream. It didn't even cross my mind, if I'm being super transparent. But ever since I turned 30, I'm currently 35, I've come to discover that the more you suppress something, the worse you're gonna feel. So I don't know, I feel like in the last few years there's been a lot of self-sincerity, should I say, from my part, kind of coming together with who I really am and the things that I like, and kind of giving up the fear. And I feel like this is a big one of them. I might have never talked about this on the channel, but the way I found myself making videos was through music. Because I was originally a musician. That was my very first thing. Sorry, I kind of have to plug it in, but I just dropped a new song with my band, Bean vs. Murphy. You can check it out here. And while working with music, I kind of convinced myself that I didn't want to do narrative stuff, which was partially true. But if you see any of my work, any of my music videos, a lot of them have a narrative element to it. Even if it's not super explicit, if it's more of an interpretive narration or interpretive story, but they all had some sort of narrative aspect to them in a way. And those narrative elements weren't oh, the story starts here and it ends here, because we're obviously talking about a 3-minute, 4-minute max video. And even in the opportunities I don't know, there's this guy that I worked with a while back called Sebastian Llosa, super cool dude. We did a full visual album for his project, which was great, but still limited. And you also have music, lyrics. It's not like you can have a fully fledged story. So yes, I kind of convinced myself that I didn't want to do narrative stuff. Ever since I was a kid, I've loved reading and I've loved writing, telling stories, which is how I found myself doing photography in the first place, how I found myself doing music, how I found myself doing video. It all points to the same direction, which is telling stories. And during the pandemic, I kind of went through this phase where I wanted to become a better writer. I became obsessed with that. One of my best friends, Nico, shout out Nico, love you bro. He's a great writer, and I remember writing scripts and writing short films and kind of bouncing off ideas with him, but specifically having him read them so he could give me pointers on how to rewrite them. And I remember him telling me a great advice that I'll carry with me probably forever, where he told me the best way to become a good writer is to rewrite. It's kind of the idea of having a rough cut and then going into later versions of that cut. And that kind of drove me to this crazy rabbit hole in which I find myself today. Finally preparing myself to direct my first short film that I also wrote. But it hasn't been an easy journey because this is obviously not the first short film I write. I think this is my 5th short film that I write, but it's actually the first one that I'm actually gonna get to shoot. And I could honestly give you so many reasons why the other ones didn't happen. And to be honest with you, it kind of sound like excuses if you pay a little bit of attention. I just found it really difficult to kind of like ask favors or ask for people to be involved in my films or have them connect. And there was this one specific short film that I want to talk about that I wrote and I never shot, called Via Veneto. Maybe one day I'll shoot it, I don't know. But I wrote this one in 2020. And I wrote it after this small situation that I had happen to me on an airport that kind of like branched off into like this whole thing. And it was about meeting someone that feels like destiny. Kind of like almost like star-crossed lovers in a way. And I wrote it and I rewrote it and I rewrote it at the time, and I could have sworn that was it, that this was gonna be my first short film, that I was gonna tour it, and for whatever reason, it kind of never happened. I'm sure the pandemic had a lot to do with it. I found the person who was perfect to play the character, but then she moved away. So it just didn't happen. That's just the reality. And years later, I think 2 years ago, I reread the script, and it's not like it wasn't good, I just wasn't that person anymore, which kind of like led me to realize that, you know, it's kind of like what Rick Rubin says. Ideas have an expiration date, and you need to act on them, because if you don't, they'll be downloaded by someone else, and someone else might just execute it. It's a similar concept that he explains in his book, The Creative Act. If you haven't read it and you're creative, you should definitely read it, where he says that ideas are not singular, they're plural, and a lot of people have access to the same idea. That's where collective consciousness comes in. Conversation for a different video, but that's kind of what happened with that one short. But that eventually led me to why we're here today. I'm filming my first short film this weekend, and the title of the short film is Kinky Little Girl. I know I know what you're probably thinking. No, it's nothing kinky, it's nothing weird, it's nothing pervy. It's just the name of the short film. I'll tell you a little bit about what it is. It's about this girl who writes smut. And I actually have like a log line and professionally written everything to explain it better. So I'm actually gonna read it off the PDF that I wrote to get people involved in the short film. So name, Kinky Little Girl. Log line. A romance author racing a deadline loses control of her story when her fictional characters revolt against her terrible writing. Synopsis of what the short film's about. Kiki Stark, our main character, a romance novelist and professional procrastinator, is facing a brutal deadline. She's stuck writing the final steamy scene in her book, the moment where her fictional characters, Frankie and Jessica, are supposed to fall into a passionate perfection. But every attempt she writes becomes more and more ridiculous, broken, and painfully cliche. Side note, she only and exclusively writes smart romance novels, YA. Eventually, her fictional characters snap, frustrated with her bad metaphors, impossible physics, bizarre creative choices, and to be honest, her terrible writing. They revolt, questioning her writing, her logic, and if we're being super honest, her competence as a writer. Faced with the collapse of both of her and her fictional world, Kiki, with the confidence of someone who definitely did not do her best, but needs to pretend her did, hits save. So that's kind of like what the whole thing is about, but obviously there's a lot of nuances and stuff that happens, but that's like big picture. We have Kiki, our writer. She's doing her best to meet her deadline, but she has kind of like a, you know, all over the place personality, just to put it like that, and for whatever reason she can't. But the funny thing is that she writes extremely descriptive things that maybe don't need to be as descriptive as she's writing it. And on top of that, it's smut, which has the tendency of being like unnecessarily descriptive. So it's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek of that. And she tries to finish this whole thing and she keeps rewriting until eventually she kind of like comes to realize that, you know, maybe finishing it's the real success, not making it sound super elaborate or super eloquent. Maybe just getting it past the finish line is where the real victory is. So obviously there's a lot of messages hitting in the piece, but it's funny. So yeah. The thing that truly convinced me was when I did the table read and it read funny. That's when I was like, okay, yeah. So maybe this is the one. So I think I'm gonna end it here. I mean, that's what I'm doing this weekend. I'm very scared, and I'm very scared because this is the first time where I'm kind of like putting my words in someone else's mouth. Someone's kind of like acting out what I wrote literally here on this same ass table. So it's kind of crazy to think about, but you know, may this be the first of many, and I'm sure I'll be surrounded by people who care, and I'm gonna care. If you know anything about me, it's that I have, you know, a relentless mindset. So I also feel like being scared, it's a good sign. So if I'm scared, that's good news. So yeah, guys, I'll keep you posted on how this goes. I'll probably do a video prior to filming, but if I don't, I'll see you guys on the other side. Peace.